Hey, I'm James from Smokin' Dad Barbecue, and Wagyu Beef Tallow has taken YouTube barbecue scenes by storm. In fact, you'd almost be convinced you can't cook a brisket without forking over $30 for something like Wagyu Beef Tallow. This beef tallow cost me nothing because it came attached to my last brisket. These are my fat trimmings that I've rendered down and made my own tallow. So today, I want to find out, is the extra $30 that you spend on something like a Wagyu beef tallow worth it? Can you actually taste the difference versus the free stuff? So today we're doing a head-to-head. I'm going to inject a tri-tip with the Wagyu beef tallow and another one with my homemade tallow, cook them like a brisket and find out if we can actually appreciate a difference, or if this is just a great influencer marketing campaign. We'll find out. Let's get into it. So this product started taking over YouTube a couple years ago. First it was one large creator, then it was two, then it was three, then it was everybody. And I fell for the hype. I went and bought myself a couple of these, and they're hard to get into Canada, so I had to do a little border trickery to get my hands on some, and I couldn't help but feel a little unimpressed. Sure, I put a couple dollars in that creator's pocket for buying it on their Amazon associate link, but I couldn't really appreciate a difference in the beef fat that I paid $30 for versus the stuff that I make at home. But with all comparisons, it is really difficult to compare something you cook today to something you maybe cooked a week or two ago. So we're going to remove that variable and cook two tri-tip roasts just like a brisket in the same day, same time, same grill, and really try and isolate down to just the beef fat itself to see if this is worth adding $30 to our cost. These two tri-tip roasts cost $50. If I was to go through almost all of this, I would nearly double the cost of these two tri-tip roasts just in the beef fat. So I think this is worth finding out if we are overpaying for beef fat or if we can get the same result using the things that we are trimming off of our briskets for free. Let me tell you how we're going to prep our two tri-tips like a brisket. Okay, I've warmed up our two tallows so I can pull it into our meat injector. I put a number on it, not that we need it because obviously you can see a difference in the color. The reason why this is a different color is this was smoked on my offset, so it was rendered during another cook that I was doing, so it's taken on some smoke, whereas this one hasn't yet. If this was in there for about an hour or so, it would take the exact same color. That reminds me though, one of the reasons I do love making my own tallows, there's so much more that you can do with it. And I'm not doing any of my normal other tricks. I've done things like rendering it with shiitake mushrooms or garlic, onions and things like that that can really help amp up the flavor of the fat that we are injecting, but that wouldn't really be a fair fight. We just want to compare the fat. So the only difference that we've got is this one had about an hour in the smoke and this one hasn't. So if the only difference is smokiness, I'm not going to call that a win. We just want to taste the quality of the fat and the flavor that gets injected inside. So I'll take a fast forward. I've got a meat injector. I'm going to inject one with just the Wagyu beef tallow and the other one with our smoked homemade beef tallow. This, by the way, was about a third. So you get a couple spoonfuls out. That goes through this, fairly quick. So that's why, again, the cost does add up. It's not like you get too much mileage, but this is about a third of our Wagyu beef tallow. Let's get injecting. Rub what came out just as a bit of a binder. I didn't mention earlier, these have already sat in the refrigerator overnight for a salt dry brine to help get salt down into our roast. So I did a quick little trim of some of the excess silver skin, as well as salted these yesterday, so they are ready to go. Set this one aside. Didn't use all of our tallow. I'll save that for the wrap. Make sure we're empty here. Now do the same thing with our homemade tallow. Okay, both our roasts took about the same amount of tallow, so I've got a little bit left over that we will use when we wrap these later on today. Let's start getting some extra ingredients on, because I've already salt brined these. I'm not going to add much salt, save for a little bit of Lowry's at the end, but I want to get some savory profile on now. So I'm going to go for a little bit of garlic and onion on each, using that excess tallow that came out as our binder. Onion, a little bit of cayenne for some red color, some crushed chili flakes, a little bit of Lowry's just for some extra salt on the very end. We've salt brined these, so we're not going to go too heavy here. I'll put down in the description how to make your own Lowry's rub if you're not able to find it commercially near you. It's really easy to make your own, and then you can control the salt or dial in some of those other ingredients that you like, and then some fresh cracked black pepper. I always prefer fresh cracked because you get so much more spice and aroma from fresh cracked versus if you're buying it pre-ground. And spice is one of the things that carries over a smoke, which is why just a little bit of cayenne or a little bit of crushed peppers do well. So savory things like garlic and onion tend to carry over, some spices, some bitterness, some sweet carries over, but a lot of gentle aromatics, things like rosemary or thyme, for example, don't necessarily survive long, slow smokes. That's why I'm going for a bit of a balance of some heat, some savory, and some spice. I'll take you fast forward. Going to do the exact same thing on the other side. Add a meter probe, and I'm going to put probe number 1 in. I think I got probe number 1 here for our homemade tallow, and number 2 will be the Wagyu beef tallow, so we can keep track of everything throughout the cook. Go fire up our smoker. Oh. Okay, we're going to be cooking on my Kamado Joe Big Joe Series 1 today, mostly because as soon as I opened my Series 3, my top gasket came unglued after using the dojo, so I have to fix that. I've learned from before that when that happens, fix it right away, don't cook, because otherwise the gasket will burn and shrink, whereas right now it'll just be a little bit of silicone and I will have that good as new. So today we're going to use the Big Joe Series 1, but this gives me an opportunity to try something that I've wanted to do, which is borrowing the 3-tier divide and conquer rack from my Big Joe Series 3 to see how it does using a heat deflector double indirect on a Series 1 or Series 2 Kamado. So that's what we're going to do. It won't work with the slow roller, but it will work with the divide and conquer rack, I believe. So that's what we're going to try. Add a little bit of smoking wood down the bottom, going with cherry. Cover that up with some fresh fogo. Oh my gosh, you see the size of this piece? I might have to break that down. I don't need that much today. Save this for another day. Maybe I can cook with one piece cook challenge. Grab our Grill Blazer grill gun, fire this up, start a nice fire towards the back. There's a sort of a bias for the air to move that way, so I like to start down and slightly towards the back. I'll take you fast forward. So because we have nice cold ceramics, I can get away with adding a couple wood chunks right now. If you watch some of my older videos, I'd always bury the wood under the coals and let the dome get heat soaked. So this is so we get nice, stable temperatures. But ever since I got my offset, I'm trying to close that gap and get a little bit more smoke. And that first stage, right when we put on our meat, is when we get the absolute best smoke. So having wood added right now, when the grill is cold and the vents are open, is going to allow this to burn cleanly and not smolder. So that's why I've added 1 or 2 small chunks right in the fire here, and these are going to combust and burn clean while everything comes up to temperature. And then as the cook goes on, we'll move to our smoking wood down below. Drop in our Series 3-tier divide and conquer rack. Heat deflectors. These are sitting on the notches on the charcoal basket. And I can just use my ash tool to recenter those so we have a nice air gap all the way around. Again, I'm not using the slow roller with the 3-tier divide and conquer rack today because I know it doesn't fit. This raises it too high, but even right now I can show you the dome closes without touching this 3-tier rack system. What this is going to allow me to do with this extra space is put in a water pan on our heat deflectors. Like so. Our X accessory ring, pizza stone. If you had spare deflectors, you could use that. And we're going to see if it's going to fit, but this is a smokeware drip pan. I'm not sure if it's too tall, but the Series 3 is a little bit taller, so we'll check that right now. And it looks like there's enough height here with the Series 3 rack that it is not sitting on our drip pan, that it can slide around without propping that up. That's the advantage of the extra height. So I'm happy with how that looks. Let's grab our tri-tips. Number 1 and number 2. I'll rotate those around as the cook progresses. And if this is the first time you're seeing some of this, craziness and it looks all too complicated, if that's too complicated, just skip it. Just go with any sort of indirect. What I'm trying to do here is promote a clean burning fire. Kamados are really energy efficient. They can go all day. In fact, I've ran a Big Joe 56 hours on 1 load of fuel. So it is almost too efficient for its own good. So we're trying to make the fire work harder. That's why we've got a second set of deflectors. The water pan is something that I've tested in a Kamado because I cook with a water pan in my offsets or many other types of smokers, and it does make a difference. I did a test side by side, but what I didn't like is it softened the bottom. If I put the water pan right underneath, that it sort of robbed the bark and made a bit of a mushy texture on the bottom. And so by putting the water pan underneath a heat deflector, we get the benefit of that water adding humidity. We need the humidity along with the smoke for that chemical reaction to adhere and create a great bark, but I don't want to get the downside of having it ruin the bottom of my bark, which is why I've placed it in the low position. And then the drip pan here is just to, again, keep everything nice and clean so I don't have to clean up my deflectors, or in this case, my pizza stone. So we're gonna let the bottom vent all the way open, top vent all the way open, until we start to come up to temperature and make some adjustments to cook at about 270 degrees Fahrenheit. All right, our two tri-tip roasts are now approaching about 185 degrees. So I'm gonna transfer them to paper. This is not something that I normally do, as I like to take the bark all the way in a foil boat, but that's not going to allow me to do the normal sort of YouTube thing where we are pouring a little bit of our tallow into the paper and wrapping that up. So let me grab our tri-tip here. So this is tri-tip number 2. I have that on the meter probe helping me keep track. Get our tallow number 2, and again I'm just going to pour a little bit of this over. Often they're putting this onto the paper below hand, or if it was still in its raw form, sort of scooping that out with a spoon. My plan here is just to put a little bit on top and bottom, and we'll wrap this up, get it back on. Put a probe back in, grab our next one. I have the foil underneath just because the tallow runs through and it's hard to clean off the counter. This makes it a little bit easier. Okay, here's our tri-tip number 1. Confirm, have the right one, meter probe aside. Grab our tallow number 1, which is our homemade tallow, and do the exact same thing. Should mention, while I have you here, I've been adding some wood chips in the bottom about every hour or so. This is again helping accelerate the bark. If you're wondering how I have what looks like a pretty decent bark only at 185 degrees, that is because we have been aggressively trying to burn as many wood chips as possible, and they are cherry, which also helps get a little bit of a darker color on our bark. Once again, we'll wrap up and install a probe, get them back on the grill until they are finished. I'll let them rest once they are probing tender and rejoin you a little bit later on for a taste test. Okay, meter says we have reached an internal temperature. Just give these a bit of a feel. Oh yeah, I think we were there. I'm gonna get this off to a foil pan. Tried to cheat without using another barbecue glove, but that hot tallow came through right away, just like that. You can see dripping out and got me. Put that in. All right, see you in about an hour. Let's take a look, see how we did on our wood chip situation as well. That looks pretty good. So we got through almost everything that we burned except for this last piece, which we added about an hour out before moving to our paper wrap, and it is still providing some smoke, you can see here. So looks pretty good. Now I'll see you in about an hour after that rest. Shut this down. Okay, our rest is complete, and as you can tell from the close-up, these two tri-tips cook like a brisket, look absolutely amazing. So on my left, your right, is the homebrew beef tallow, and on my right, your left, is the Wagyu beef tallow. I've left the meter probes in with the numbers so that we don't mix anything up. I'm going to remove them, but just so you know where they are, because I'm going to ask Sarah to come out in a minute and help me with a bit of a blind taste test. Since obviously I know which is which, she can help also give another opinion on whether or not we can taste the difference. So let me bring you nice and close. I've got my Dow Strong offset slicer. We can carve these up, see how we did. Okay, I'll get rid of our two tallow containers so it's not really as obvious to Sarah which one is what, as well as our meter probes. And I'm only going to take a slice or two out of each. Make sure I've got a spot here where I'm running against the grain. It's a pretty convincing looking brisket from a tri-tip. That looks good. Let's get a slice or two. Perfect. Help make sure that doesn't oxidize. Go for the same spot right here. Looks pretty similar. All right, let's dive in for our taste test. All right, welcome. And I brought Sarah along to help me out with the taste test. So I've got two tri-tips that we've prepared. So I have two tri-tips that I prepared just like a brisket.
Sorry. Okay, go ahead again.
Yeah, this is why I don't invite you out. You just laugh at me on camera.
All right, go ahead.
All right. All right, welcome back. As you can see, I brought Sarah along to help with a blind taste test, since obviously we know which ones are which. We're gonna have her taste first. We're not looking for anything else in terms of smoke or brisket, because it's not really brisket, it's a tri-tip that we've cooked like a brisket. What we wanna understand, is there a flavor difference between these two? One, is there a difference, and do you like one of the two better? So why don't you pick one, and then try the other one, and I'll do the same.
Okay, sounds good. I'll take this one. I'm gonna
Sounds good.
pull a little. Here, that's a nice pull.
Yeah.
And a smoke ring. That's really good.
Tri-tip, it's always good.
It is always.
Tri-tip is if you have a smaller Kamado, like when I do on my Joe Jr., this is the best way to get a brisket experience on something like your Joe Jr. because it's very similar to the point end of a brisket, but a fraction of the size. Why don't you go for the second one?
All right.
See if there's a difference. Really, again, just taste.
Okay.
Is there a difference?
Not.
Do you like
Not
one better than
really.
the other?
There's hardly any difference. I feel like if I was going to pick between the two, I would pick this one.
Okay.
But I don't know that that's the flavor is so hard to tell.
And what did you like more about the one versus the other?
Oh goodness. Okay, I'll have to try it. Let me see.
You're just trying to get dinner.
I know. I just want dinner. It's delicious. There is a slight difference in flavor. I like this one.
Yeah?
Yeah.
What are you picking up?
I don't know how to explain it.
Well, maybe let me try then. Let me
try
go
it.
for the same one here that you liked. Cheers. I'm not going to eat all that piece.
We'll see if you agree. It's good,
Good.
right?
Mhm.
Like it feels juicy, but it's not. I don't know.
Super juicy, super tender, just
All right.
pull apart.
I don't know. The cooks, I'm assuming, because it's a comparison, you did them the same, but it seems almost juicier. But you see, I want to know what you think.
It can be sometimes just two different tri-tips,
Right, it's true.
not necessarily from the same cow.
Right. That's why I tried to stick to flavor, but I'm curious what you think about flavor.
Well, tender too.
I know.
I'm not sure if there is a difference. There is a tenderness.
Yeah. Which is probably just the tri-tip. I wouldn't say that's because
I
of
think
the
that's the only
flavor.
difference.
Yeah. The flavors are so similar.
Identical.
Yeah.
So, the difference, grab behind us, that we did here is comparing making your tallow with leftover brisket trimmings, which is what this one is,
Yeah.
and actually what we picked. The slight difference here is this I rendered in the offset, so it was smoked. So it has a little bit of
Okay.
smoke profile,
Little
so
bit.
maybe
Yeah.
it had a slight advantage that we didn't smoke the Wagyu tallow, but the Wagyu tallow should have its own advantage that it's Wagyu tallow, and this is $30 extra, and we used a third
Used our
this
own.
container. So we used about $10 extra injecting into this one. So now that you know a little bit more about what's inside each one, do you still kind of keep your vote the same?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd do ours every time. And it's cheaper.
Absolutely.
And it's what we normally do.
Right.
Yeah, I like it. Stick with our method.
Absolutely. Let's
Yeah.
get this inside. I'll rejoin you for a few closing thoughts. Thanks, sir.
I don't know if I did well.
You did perfect.
I feel like we need to edit one part when I was like chewing with and talking at the same time.
So there you have it. I wanted to find out today if Wagyu beef tallow was just hype or if it actually helps us turn out a better barbecue. And Sarah's input really matters here because standing in the smoke, I may not be able to pick up on some of the things that someone not standing around a smoker all Saturday is able to discern with their palate. So thanks to Sarah for helping confirm there's no difference between these two. The only difference is about 30 bucks. Now, the story's not quite done there because even though it does cost a lot more, it's convenient. You don't have to do any work. You can order it on Amazon and it comes to your door and you can skip the making your own. So I do appreciate the convenience of this. Where I started to run into a bit of an issue is the fact that it's presented in a way that suggests it's much better. And something that is smoking all day, I really just don't think my palate, Sarah's palate, or any other palate I've had test the two can pick up on that. So if you've got a super palate, then all the power to you. Maybe this is worth the extra money. But for me, I'm going to stick with making my own, not only because it's less expensive, but I can customize this flavor and get endless options. Whether we add shiitake mushrooms, garlic, onions, or anything like that, we can help inject not only the fat, which is going to give some of that juicy texture when we bite it into it, but also some of the flavors, whether it's smoked or we're trying to get a little bit more umami or depth. There is just so much you can do with beef tallow. Let me know if you'd like to see a little bit more of an in-depth deep dive on flavoring your beef tallow down in the comments, and I'll add that to an upcoming video topic if enough of you would like to see it. But for today, I think the results are clear. I'm going to stick to making my own, especially since we've put them head to head and we're not able to find any difference other than convenience for the money. That's it for today. I'm James from Smoky Dad Barbecue signing off, and remember, don't be afraid to fire it up.